Yeah, which
Hi, it's the 29th. It's our bonus day for 2024, leap year day. And I'm glad to have you with us for Content Evolution New World. Mike, great to have you co-hosting with me as always. Everything going well? And any we're going to talk about surge pricing. Any surge pricing in your world?
yeah, it's we've
Good.
talked about it with skiing. You mentioned skiing earlier, and it's interesting to see the how dynamic pricing has affected that industry, which means it's really expensive these days if you just show up at a ski resort not having bought your ticket online
Mm, yeah,
beforehand.
yeah. I remember one of the basic business framework changes that took place in the ski industry was this whole notion of selling the season beforehand,
Mhm.
right? Because nobody was willing to sell consortiums like Ski Inc. on the East Coast or Vail Resorts on the out in Colorado on the West Coast as two of the dominant conglomerates in skiing. Nobody wanted to loan them any money because they had no idea what the season was going to be like, right? And the fact is, by creating the Epic Pass, for Vail and equivalents, they're able to sell a big part of their season ahead of time, and that created collateral so that they could take out loans, right, and expand the facilities, put in more. It's important for them to, as the climate changes, to make their own snow versus waiting for
Right.
Mother Nature to do it. So being able to put in the ponds and the blowers and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm uh, dynamic pricing, yeah, and part of it is shifting around moment to moment, right, during the day, and other parts of it are these longer time horizons that allow you to be more resilient.
And sports has done the longer one for a long time. Sports has season tickets is another form of that.
Yeah, 100%. And the fact is, being able to this is all part of being able to sense and respond, and to reframe um, you know the notion of, is it a market, right? Am I looking at a dynamic market, or am I looking at something else, and are people willing to play? um, so we have a lot of representation from different areas. Mike, I would say that if you have a stock portfolio, everybody's used to, hey, moment by moment, if I have access to my trading platform, all right, everything's changing in a minute by minute because it's a dynamic market. Um, why do we have, in your opinion, negative connotations with that as we move into other parts of our lives?
Well, I think it's the notion of changing something that was predictable in the sense you would look at the board or the menu and see a specific price. I think those notions of predictability. Although I think reading those stories, it seems clear they're equating their fast food before they corrected their first announcement. They had their modification later or clarification.
It's only signage.
It's only signage, but they're probably sensing,
Yeah.
or have seen in the marketplace, right? I think it's been for the last 5 years or so. Most gas stations have digital price
Mhm.
displays, not the old school, where the guys or gals would go out with the little numbers and change them, because the price of oil is fairly volatile. But now I think they're looking at that saying, well, it doesn't seem to slow down people from buying gas. So maybe we can do the same thing with burgers. And it's like, I think that was an interesting and weak clarification where they said, oh, no, the pricing won't go up. But I think the thing there is this is when you have really smart forecasters and modelers and probably using some AI. This notion of being able to charge whatever the market will bear at a millisecond or second in time sounds pretty efficient. You know,
Yeah.
if you're talking about how you price your products, and you don't have those, anguished meetings every week on should we raise the price of the, the big cheeseburger by 2.5 cents in the Midwest. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Right.
They can test,
Yeah,
in real time, and I get that. But I think to your point, what's the old acronym we always used to learn at Gartner when we were doing our presentations for symposium? What's in it for the consumer?
Yeah.
And I didn't
When I
see
would
real good answers there.
when I would travel, I'm a self-trained chef. All right, and I've worked back of the house at actual fine dining restaurants. All right, and essentially apprenticed myself to folks to learn the trade, so I could, I didn't want to do it for a living, but at any rate, when we were traveling a lot, like to go to 5-star Michelin kinds of places, but we would go to lunch instead of dinner because it's different price. A lot of times same things are on the menu, right? Sometimes different, but if you want that experience at a fraction of the cost, you go to lunch instead of dinner. And that's well known, right? And so the fact is, if that starts to infiltrate fast food, right, that, oh, there's a lunchtime price and then there's a dinner price, why would we think that is odd? And is it that people don't feel like they can budget? I think that we're constantly making trade-offs, so it's just a matter
Sure.
of moving a lot of things that used to be considered more known into, I have to consider that too, for whatever I'm going to spend today or whatever I'm going to spend this week or this month or this year. Is there are going to be variables, and I'm going to have to make some dynamic trade-offs, right? Guess what? The accounting parts of businesses that would have annual planning and budget allocation cycles collapse to quarterly and then collapse to monthly. And Walmart, today, the way that it uses its IT department, pays its bills based on what's being beamed back to headquarters from all the stores in terms of cash flow from the last 15 minutes. And that triggers a set of, okay, we sold this stuff, let's pay this vendor, right? Because we sold X percentage of, the inventory that's in the store, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that kind of dynamic supply and value chain, it's becoming, part of our lives. So maybe, we need to have our own counter, dynamic thing with AI or something in our hands to help
There'll be
us.
an app for that. There'll be an app for
Yes.
that. There'll be an app, much like people have who commute or drive a, have the apps that show them where's the cheapest gas today in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I think likewise, you'll say it's, the Burger King. Oh, wait a minute. No, was it Wendy's? Burger King,
Wendy's.
Wendy's. Dave Thomas. Late Dave Thomas. It'll be the Wendy's in Palo Alto, is 10 cents or is, a better deal today than the one in, 5 miles up the road in Redwood City. I think also it's probably like we've seen with a lot of objects and kind of transactions we've made online. I think one of the things Wendy will probably do is, what's going to look really good every day is a bundle, right? We used to just have the Happy Meals for kids. It's probably going to be a bundle the way they will drive that. If in fact, they do get into this fully deployed dynamic pricing model. It'll be interesting to see if there's any, how should we say, not collateral, but incidental changes in trend and other transactions that happen as a result of somebody looking for the best deal on a Wendy's burger today. But I think bundles are probably going to be where they focus that. The bundle for the sandwich and fries and a shake is X. Go ahead, Mark.
Go
I,
ahead.
I was just going to say the other way to do that, deal with it, is to suggest there's a range. So a Big Mac, right? We used to have the Big Mac comparison where the economist does the price of a Big Mac all over the world and to judge inflation. But suppose the Big Mac just costs between $3 and $5, depending on when you go. And so that's the way it works, and it's literally minute to minute because they want to even out their demand. So that's their incentive for doing this. So I would say I would learn that I should go buy my Big Mac at 3 in the afternoon and not at the noon or not at the dinner hours or the lunch hour, and I will just change my behavior accordingly. And how they advertise that, I have no idea, but they will figure out a way.
I think that the observation that I made in the preview note is, demand pricing that fixates your attention on, during surge periods like lift or whatever, we're going to raise prices, okay? Versus during off-peak hours, we'll lower prices. People would respond to that. They would say, oh, so you're going to lower the price. So the fact is,
You're right.
it actually has the same dynamic, but the messaging is so much more positive if you talk about lowering prices off peak as opposed to talking about surge pricing that I'm going to charge you more.
And that's Kahneman's biases. We're much more
Yeah.
biased to
Yeah, I
loss
mean,
than we
it's
are.
just,
Okay.
it's kind of like, why would you ever sign up for a narrative, right? That people, that the psychology tells you, don't do that. Mac, is there anything that corresponds to what we're discussing here in, beyond stock trading, right? That you have line of sight to or insights about, given your background?
And this has been a really great conversation. And one of the reasons I've been quiet is I'm going to have to drop off for another call shortly.
Sure.
But I do think, Kevin, what you were pointing out, that if you grew up thinking that if I go to La Belle Helene, that lunch is going to be less expensive than dinner and there's going to be different items, then you become accepting to that. If you were to say a Frosty at noon is now going to be 25 cents more expensive than a Frosty at 3 a.m., then it's kind of, and I think your last point of I'm lowering prices, I'm not raising prices, is an excellent one, and is how they should approach it. But the stories as they began to break on this seem to be, at least from what I've seen, universally negative.
Yes.
So brand damage was the unintended consequence. And I think some of that, and I've had this conversation in a number of forums, is that the people who tend to be the most frequent visitors to fast food restaurants tend to be among the most economically impaired, and that this can come off as economically exploitive of a person who can't afford a Frosty at all. So it has been interesting to watch the evolution of this conversation, and I'm going to keep track of where it goes, because I do think if the idea was to smooth out demand, then there's just so much that could have been done differently.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this kind of, I remember this kind of dynamic changeable signage in these kinds of environments. It was actually started in airports, right, and mass transportation, and it kind of migrated into other categories. Is the impetus for that innovation normally does not come from marketing, right?
Yes.
It's coming from a different part of the organization. It might even be IT, right, that's bringing it in from the side, or the people who are doing transaction processing, right? Because I remember my dad worked on the McDonald's account, right? Because he had done Sabre, and then he'd done the Holodex reservation system. And this was like reserving a hamburger, inside the store. And interestingly enough, they couldn't make one that was cheap enough for, this new outfit called McDonald's, right? So they found a Japanese keyboard, an 8x8 Japanese keyboard that, had 64, things with the double byte, right?
Mhm.
So that you could shift. And they just took all the Japanese off and they made it, hamburgers, French fries, Coke, milkshake, across and then how many do you want? Okay. And you just punch the thing on the,
Mhm.
on that keyboard because they already made it. Right. So it was relatively inexpensive to just, take those keyboards and make them order entry. Right. And then it would flash something up on a screen. It was a green screen. It was those older things back in the, in the kitchen, and you'd make the orders instead of the wheel with the paper, all that kind of good stuff. Why am I telling you that? Because another way to lower your cost, if that's what you're concerned about, or to change, is changing the items that are available during peak demand.
Right.
You have a bigger menu. All right. During lower parts of the day, as you're heading into the wee parts of the day, you say there's only one hamburger. All right. And there's only, we don't have onion rings. We only have French fries. All right. Or whatever it is. All right. That's another way, to get down to a smaller workforce in the thing. How many times have we, because of the dynamics of cost of labor and crime, that they lock the doors at a certain time and they say only the drive-through windows available, right?
Yeah.
Well, those are all also part of not just dynamic pricing, but dynamic operational decisions that you're making, and it changes the interaction between the person who's buying and the cost of
Right.
what's available from the provider. Right. It doesn't mean that you went dark. It just means you have less choice. All right, but you still have something that blah blah blah. So these are all part of the same game. The signage changing is part of being able to bring those variables, right, to life, right, for both the company and the customer. Yes,
So,
Mark.
this is a fascinating conversation to me. And what I love about this is that you guys have come at it from such a strong business perspective and experience. And this is me going to business school for the first time, in a sense that where I see my perspective is so different. So this is in a sense, a short-term perspective. We now can do dynamic pricing. What does it mean? How do we deal with it? How does the boardroom deal with it? And all these kind of things. The way I look at it is I think we're moving into a new age where just the kids are going to grow up with, okay, the pricing is dynamic, right? Pricing is not the whole thing that we used to know that there was a fixed price. That I really see a very big difference in the year 2000 between how people are going to be. And so this is just another instance for me of saying, okay, before in the second age forever, we had prices that were fixed prices. And now in the third age, what I call it the third age, we're going to have prices are just going to be thought of as in a very different way. And the people who grow up will just think of those prices and they will look at us like we're crazy, as they do for many things about you had fixed prices. What are you kidding? And so there's a huge societal change going on in this, and we're in the transition. So what would this conversation is how do we deal with this transition that was facilitated by technology?
Sure. I mean, Mike was talking about bundles a moment ago. I mean, I'll just give you a different, perspective. Imagine trying to get people to go back to the movie theater after they've habituated on, I've got a big screen at home and I can, I've got a galaxy of things that I can suck in through my satellite or my wire or whatever, right? That you could create a bundle in a different environment, which would be more like a food court, where McDonald's and Taco Bell and, Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever, are all part of the same complex. And you go in and your ticket, all right, allows you to be entertained and take a meal, right? And so, there's a certain value that's associated with that. And you might be able to go around and get different things. It's, well, I like McDonald's French fries, but I'd really like
Whatever
fried
cheese on your
breast,
drink.
from, whatever, that you could kind of mix and match your, thanks, back.
No,
See,
no, I'm not gone yet. I just wanted to
Okay, so
add
I'm just
something
saying that,
before I had to leave.
one port of entry, one price, admits you to that environment, right? For, the afternoon or whatever it is. And, you have, a different currency, the credits for, and I can watch 2 movies and I can have, a meal and I can have blah, 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 all those amenities, right? For a single price. And kind of like going to one of those Caribbean all-inclusive vacations, I don't have to think about it anymore, is that, I've paid my one price and for the rest of that day, I don't have to think about anything, right? It's just kind of available. That would get people back into, into the theater, in my opinion, because you're changing. It's not just a movie anymore. It's a entertainment and, dining environment, right? Blah, blah, blah. So people can think that kind of stuff up. Yes, Matt.
Go ahead, Bob.
And just, I'm going to hit this real quick and then drop off. And I think Mike put this in the chat. I think, Kevin, what you said concerning this didn't come from marketing. And I
Right.
was just literally listening to the Deloitte article in the Wall Street Journal about the role of marketing in the world today. And it had said, oh, pricing is coming from marketing. And I think the issue is that I think we should discuss it at some point, is what is the role of marketing? Because it's almost to the point that there is more than one thing that we are currently labeling marketing, and maybe that needs to change.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was getting at, Mac, is, that was a space I was in for the last 12 years with that last company I worked at. And I would often get frustrated with our customers or the customers I was working with. And I began to realize, and I realized this some time ago, it kind of just prompted me to put that into the chat, which is what I learned in those last 10, 12 years is that almost everybody that works outside of marketing has no real idea what the term brand means and what their brand means. And so I would say that's one challenge marketers they've always faced that. Like, what do you guys do? Well, we create environments and reasons for people to buy our stuff. And if we're lucky enough, we build a brand people recognize. And, I think that, I think it's going to be the same thing, right, Mac, for the future now in these sorts of things where somebody or a group outside of marketing that's supposedly largely responsible for the customer experience has a great idea. I mean, back in the old days, I remember that was some of the scariest, the one thing I learned in my first job in marketing was, oh, well, I'll go, when do I get to go talk to the engineers about what's coming down the road from our company? And my boss, a guy who's since passed, great line says, don't ever go over and talk to the engineering team about what's coming next. I said, why? I said, because the scariest words a marketer can hear is the reality with engineering and design teams. Why are you guys doing that? We can.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, and I think
who has to solve what problem is that solve? We don't know.
Yeah, and that's so much of it. Chris Moorman, who probably lives about 5 miles from Kevin.
I know Chris Moorman quite well.
Yeah, Chris wrote part of the article and did all of the research for Deloitte. And that idea that one group of people are going to think marketing is a strategic function, while another group of people think it is just there to execute what I want it to. And it's creating a deeper and deeper schism in what we used to call marketing. Gentlemen, I am sorry I have to leave, but
Matt, thanks for joining with us. We greatly appreciate your voice for the time you spent. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just remember, from, the time that you were serving on the marketing advisory board and then, before that, the industry advisory board, Mike, we had a management system that said, okay, marketing has to go find out what the customer requirements are. Now, at the beginning, it was, can we even make it? Can we even make a computer that runs on batteries? And so there was a clear engineering challenge at the beginning, that was just driven by, can we get the parts? Can we manage the supply chain? Because every week the line would stop because, hey, we didn't get any hard drives this week, whatever. That all got solved. And then at the time that I was able to come in, I said, well, why don't we find out what people are doing with this stuff, right? And we went out and did ethnographic studies. We went out and did quant, right? We were able to segment the marketplace. We were able to, call out and define the customer sets and get them to cluster in a meaningful way. And that meant that we could describe what we were going to do to our internal board of directors, what was called the IPMT, the Integrated Product Management Team. And if you could not describe the customer that we had identified in the marketplace and what they want and make it map, the product wouldn't exit.
Right.
So we're not going to make that. All right. Go back and do it again. All right. And we would hold people. I think this was the biggest magic trick of the whole thing from an organization point of view, is a marketing person that brought requirements to development for a product could not leave the job until it came back and was ready to be manufactured and they brought it to market successfully. All right. Is that until you completed that cycle, you couldn't leave the job. Right. And that creates full responsibility for, I told you what to make, and now I'm going to bring it to market, right, at whatever the price, whatever the markets are that you described. And if it succeeded, you would be rewarded. Okay.
Right.
You would, promotion or next assignment or whatever, but you couldn't go until that was the case. All right. How many organizations actually operate that way? And the answer is, I don't think very many. Go ahead, Mark.
I'm gonna drop off as well in a minute because I love these conversations and I want to stay, but there's something about virality and kids and that I really want to.
Well, we like viral
I have to
kids.
say what.
We like
Virality.
viral kids.
We like viral kids, and actually, it's a topic that I'd love to talk about sometime because virality is both the road to scale and it's the road to perdition if it's the right thing or the wrong thing, and that's what I'm thinking about. So,
write us a short note about what you want to talk about, Mark, and we'll.
Absolutely. Listen, this is you are the best people that I interact with as a group. So thank you all. And I'm very happy to be here. But I'm going to check out this other thing. So keep going. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And I think, see you, Mark, Mac, all leaving in right in a row. Kevin, I think that was interesting. I look at that and I think you and I both came from a time where those engineers some of them were so, had great ideas and were so charismatic or bullying, that they could get their thing through.
Right.
I guess that's what's kind of struck me with this particular example of the dynamic pricing with Wendy's is back to the challenge of the marketer. It's like, did this happen like a couple of months ago? These guys had, or likely they're testing out a system, right? They're testing out a platform or a piece of software, and they're like, oh, because for the last 10 years, what's been one of the big things, right? That kind of always kind of on the front edge of tactics and capabilities for marketers were digital signage, right? Well, there the idea was, I could display this, have a smart advertisement, and then, it's a QR code or whatever. I can get Mike or Kevin or Andrea or anybody to just say, oh, here's my information. Please, at some point, send me some more information about your product I see on this cool digital signage thing that I'm seeing. And, I think this test, that's I think what I got off the kind of the mea culpa they put out a couple hours later was tests. And I'm sure it was a digital, some sort of a digital platform they're doing. Now, my question is that and maybe you saw this in the story, I missed it. given that so many of those franchises, and I think it's true with Wendy's, right, they're franchises. They're not owned and operated, right, by the company. Some of them are owned by the company. I'm sure that's the owned and operated Wendy's are where they are, going to be where they did or will do some of these tests. And I'm curious, the thing I always have is, is having some experience in working with those types of franchise organizations is that if this test platform is what it is with some dynamic pricing, is this something the company is going to pay and take and kind of give to franchisees? Or my guess is this is going to be, hey, you want to sign the lease for those 25, Wendy's is coming up, Mike. If you're willing to share another 5% of your gross off those, we'll put this new platform in place.
Well, normally what you're doing is it's like an escrow account, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a percentage of money, and sometimes they can say, well, would you like to remodel the inside of your store, or would you like to have dynamic signage, or would you like, so there's some ways that they can allocate money based on, a non-recurring thing like, hamburger buns coming in the back door, whatever. We can talk about the different business models that are associated with the different, franchises. McDonald's is actually not really running on a franchise model. McDonald's is a real estate company, right? They're taking rent, okay? And they own the supply chain, and therefore the owner of the restaurant is the one that has to actually sell the hamburgers and make money. Whereas, it's different, for, a Wendy's, right? Because it's more of a profit share franchise, blah, 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 like Jiffy Lube, right? But regardless of that, I think that they're missing, because pricing is with this dynamic signage is a blunt instrument, okay? It's obvious you could do that. However, it doesn't get to the intricacies of how to optimize, the actual interaction. So dynamic pricing allows you to say, oh, you know what, we have a special sandwich this week, right? Which otherwise you would have to insert something and physically change it, just like you were talking about before. With this, you just ship the code along with whatever the, reconfiguration of ingredients is, and, boom, you're in there. The other thing is that with IoT, you should be able to look at, because a lot of this is pre-prepared, right? And you say, look at all the chicken sandwiches and that are here that haven't been sold versus we're selling a lot of hamburgers today, right? So what do you do? All right. Well, we've got a special on chicken sandwiches right now. All right, because that's what it's sensing. It's like we've got 10 stacked up, all right, versus, the hamburgers are selling like hotcakes. So guess what? We got a deal, we got a combo deal, or we have it, you don't have to directly say, I'm lowering the price of the chicken sandwich. You can say, you can create an on-demand combo deal, all right? And say, hey, you know what? You buy a chicken sandwich, right now, and you get a free Coke. Those kinds of things get rid of your inventory as opposed to it going into the trash. All right.
Well, I'm wondering, as you say that, my first thought is, as you were describing that particular scenario, ties back to, I don't know if they have, I'm sure they do, is that they have a mobile app, right? Wendy's, that is, because as you were deciding, like, and if I had that point of access to the consumer, meaning an application on their smartphone, all of a sudden, maybe I am more incented, right, to turn on notifications and say, you know what, because maybe, I'm making this up. I got a 15-year-old kid. She's an athlete. She's a basketball player. And that kid goes through so much protein every single day. The idea that I can save money to get a couple extra chicken sandwiches that I could, throw in into the kid's room, or stash in the fridge and say, honey, next time you're hungry, don't wake up mom or me to go make you some food. Just go hit the chicken sandwich supply. That I'm being a little coarse there, but it's like, you know, those are things I think parents might actually think about, right? Which is like, hey, wait a minute, I can get some extra sandwiches or whatever. But I think there's, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say I can speak directly to that. I have an 18-year-old and I go often with him, and he eats almost all fast food, and I go often with him. He will never go to a fast food restaurant without checking the specials, without checking at that instant what's on sale. And at McDonald's, it's typically daily, but it could be minute to minute. He will always check that on his phone before he buys a fast food anywhere.
He's an apex consumer. I mean that complimentary, right? I mean, it's like, hey, you know, when I was a kid, you know, it wasn't cool to clip coupons or look for deals, right? It was like, let's go buy, you know, get the coolest thing we possibly can. Who cares whether it's on special? And now, which was a great thing for whatever store I was, you know, buying something from. But when you realize it's your money, yeah, you start looking, and I think that's great that he's looking around for the best possible deal, not in general, but right now.
But I'm saying that's a new generational behavior, and
oh, I agree. I agree. I'm
you
just
know
saying
that is enabled. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that the generation that you're talking about, there's some good cultural anthropology to support that. Looking for a deal, thriftiness is a virtue. Okay? And you know, the luxury goods people are struggling to be relevant right now, because it's kind of like, why am I paying that much for this thing? I don't see, you know, value in it. Right now, there may be categories where say, well, I'm buying this and I'm going to have it for a long time, right? And therefore it's worth paying the extra money because I think it's more durable, or, you know, it's going to last longer, or whatever. I don't know. All right. But the point is, you know, just paying for, I mean, I'm a brand guy, right? Just paying for a brand because it's a brand, right? Yeah, that's losing its luster, right?
yeah.
And
what's Porsche done for me today?
So here's a solution to that. That's interesting that I've thought about. So take Tumi. Tumi is a very expensive luggage brand, and it's nice if you can get them. But what the thing that I always thought that Tumi should do is not play with prices, but should just become a build on demand place. Because I would pay a high price if I could design, even with parameters, my suitcase so that it is my suitcase and I like it the way it is. And they don't do that. I've never figured out why they haven't done that, because it's certainly doable with the technologies we have. And so that's another way you can go.
Yeah, I think I would just say this. I think that you could make a play in luggage because the exterior has to meet certain requirements to fit into.
Exactly.
But the interior could be highly configurable.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
that's what I'm talking about. And so you could do that. The other thing that they're doing, if you go to In-N-Out, which is our big deal out here, all these places now have secret menus. So basically you can have it your way. So you can get an In-N-Out. This is not on the sign. You can get an In-N-Out wrapped in lettuce. You can get an In-N-Out wrapped in tomatoes, no bun. And they have names for these things. So these secret menus are popping up all over the world. You can do it animal style. You can do this. They don't advertise this stuff actually at all, but everybody knows about it. And at least all the young people know about it. And I've read in a lot of things that have come up, these secret menus that every single place has. But then, you can that's one way to customize it. That's halfway to customize it. And then the other way is the old Burger King have it your way, where you can just customize it completely. And now they're starting to charge a cup. Like if you I just read this yesterday. If you get a fillet of fish and they give you a half a slice of cheese with the fillet of fish at McDonald's, and some people were complaining, what, a half a slice of fish, a half a slice of cheese? And McDonald's says, yeah, it blends better with the taste. And now, but that's also an excuse for them to charge you another 40 cents for another half a slice of cheese. If you're one of the people who says, think I'm getting gypped within the cheese area. So what they do is they now charge extra for these different things, have it any way you want, but now they literally can price it by the pickle slice, right? So you can say, I want 3 extra slices of pickle. Okay, that'll be 60 cents, 20 cents a slice, or whatever else it is. And they're doing that now.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
um, now what you're doing is you're micromanaging, what your preferences are, and the organization is saying we can accommodate that for a price because we're a production line. All right, we make it this way, right? And if you want us to do this, it's not the price of the pickle, it's the price of labor changing it to be the way that you want it. All right, it's actually a labor cost, not a cost of whatever the thing is. All right, it's the customization is that they want to they want to do that, and I can understand, all right, that kind of charging. I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but I would want to test, all right, what is that doing to preference? All right, does that mean that you're more or less likely, that does that ability to customize make me more likely to come here more often and to give you my money, or is that an inhibitor? All right, and I
Obviously,
don't know the answer.
that's Burger King obviously built a whole marketing campaign on that, the Have It Your Way. But I don't think it's related to cost at all. I think that now we're in a world where they can make it anyway at the same price. The idea of having that these are on assembly line and the old pricing curve, the BCG pricing curve is gone that in many areas, because the way we produce things now says, I don't care which way you make it and how you want it, it's going to cost exactly the same. The robots are going to be doing it anyway. And so that
Well, maybe when the robots arrive, and that will be true, and then it won't cost anymore. But there's still a lot of human labor inside these stores right now.
Okay,
Right.
but that's the change. That's exactly. I take your
And
point.
by the way,
And that's the
culturally,
change that's coming
I
culturally.
mean, culturally, we have a tendency to like, um, being able to have it the way we want. Now, some of the best food on the planet is in Japan. Good luck changing anything, all right, in
It's
Japan.
in plastic. It's
No,
in plastic.
no, even
In
at
the
the
window in
restaurant, it's like,
plastic.
no, it's that this is the way we make this. You
Mhm.
will take it the way we make it. All right. You can ask for it to change, and they just go, no. They'd say no nicely, but they say, no, we have a process. This is the way the chef makes it. All right. So thanks for asking, but no. All right.
And that's why they can make it in plastic, Kevin, because of exactly what you said. So I don't know if you've ever been to the stores where they have, thousands of different products in plastic that they can put in store windows, but they do, and those are very standardized process products. And you probably can get one made if you standardize on a product. You go to the plastics people and you say, make a plastic of this, and we'll put it in our window, and that's what it's going to be. I totally agree with that. What I'm interested in, and I'm going to ask you guys especially you, Kevin, for the recommendations. The anthropologists, the cultural anthropologists who are looking at these changes, I would like to know more about them. The only one I know who worked for a company is Genevieve Bell, who used to work for Intel.
I
And
know Genevieve, but she's back
right.
in Australia now.
I know she's back in Australia. She's brilliant. We put together a whole bunch of stuff together, and so I'm looking for other people like that who are saying, because I am trying to write about the way, not the transition, but the way it will be, and the way it's the trends essentially, and what will young people as they grow up in the third millennium, or for whatever we want to call it, how will they be different in
Okay.
their attitudes, beliefs, and all this than we were? So any references to that you can pass along, I'd really
Well,
appreciate.
I'm going to put in a plug for one of Content Evolution's, advisors and, members, Grant McCracken. Dr. McCracken is one of the world's most renowned cultural anthropologists for enterprise. He works for the big auto companies, for
Good.
Procter and Gamble, for Mondelez, for all of the the big names in fast moving consumer goods and trends. He's a serial author. He lives in I better not say where he lives, but in the Connecticut tri-state area. And glad to put you in touch with Grant. He is about to run. He has been running Culture Camp, which is for groups of people to be able to unpack, what he sees on the horizon, and he does that from time to time. His next one is
Bingo,
called,
please do.
is Future Camp. Is
Okay.
he's doing a thing about not only this is what's happening now, this is what I see happening next, right? Based on, having done this for decades. And so
I'm going to camp. I'm going to camp. I'm going to camp. Great.
So
Okay.
now you should get on an airplane and go to Future Camp in New York. I think it's going to be at the New School. And it's a couple of months from now. So
Okay, that's
get you in
perfect.
touch with Grant.
Perfect.
There
Thank
are
you so
other,
much.
practitioners, out in your neck of the woods. Melissa Sefkin, who was Melissa was at our Content Evolution gathering, right at the top of the hotel, whichever one it was.
Oh, I was there. Yeah, I was there.
So Melissa Sefkin was there.
How do you spell her last name?
Cefkin.
Thank you.
And she lives in the Bay Area. Is at my recommendation, is now also on the faculty at California College of the Arts. And she was one of the people that I worked with at IBM on ethnographic and cultural anthropological explorations. And she's in your neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm sure I met her, and so good.
Oh, I'm just saying that
Yeah, please connect
there are
us.
others, but I'm gonna stop there. All right, Grant, because of his eminence in the field, if you look up Grant McCracken, you'll see a dozen books that he's written. All right,
Will do.
and Melissa's within reach. All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. We're coming up to the top of the hour. We have we've taken Mark to another section of our online business degree, and Mike and I are just doing what we normally do, which is just riffing on business and organization and technology stuff that that NuWorld was designed to explore. Mark, I would just ask this question because you're interested in it. Is think metaphorically for a moment, move away from fast food, move away from whatever, and say, what does dynamic availability of selection mean for educating a new generation of people? All right. If you had, oh, look, the board's changing. All right. I walk in the door, the school, it says, what's available today? All right. Is there a similar phenomenon that could, present itself in terms of opportunities for, dynamic, you don't like the word education, but dynamic learning opportunities. So I'll just say.
Thank you. That literally, I'm dealing with this every day with my son and stuff like that. So one of the things that he said to me, this is a little story. He said, I said, you're trying to clean the carpets in your car. He has this new fancy sports car, not so fancy old Mazda, and let me make some suggestions about how you might do it. And he said, I don't need your suggestions. I've got YouTube. I've already been on YouTube. So what's happening is that this is this dynamic menu, which is essentially everything in lots of variations, is replacing the what we used to do in education, where you were limited to the teachers that were around you, their knowledge, their things, whatever it was. And so no matter how dynamic, and the schools think, oh, we have these big catalogs, but they don't have what you want. And so that's increasingly a phenomenon. My Another quote from my son is, every once in a lifetime a project comes around that you're interested in. And so what we're doing is we're seeing catalogs not with tens of offerings, but with millions of offerings, or on YouTube billions of offerings. And the kids are learning to negotiate that, and to so he knows how to find what he wants on YouTube, and he knows how to do that, and he'd much rather do that than take a course in automotive, or take a course in this, or take a course in that, because the courses are stretched out, they're linear, they're all these things, and they're conceived, and this is another insight I had yesterday, they're conceived in ways that benefit the teacher. The teacher only has to teach a course once, and it's there, and you're supposed to take it all in if you've taken the course. So I was in a situation where I wanted to do something in a group, and I said, well, how do you DM this guy in this software? And he said, well, didn't you take the tutorial? Go back and take the tutorial. And that's the teacher saying, it was much more convenient for me to make a tutorial and point you when you need it, and you should have gone. But from my point of view as a student, as a learner, it's much more convenient to say, okay, that's the thing I need to know right now. Tell me. And
Well,
so if he has that all the time, he's screwed. If I have the other one, if I don't have the other one, I'm screwed. So we're rebalancing this.
I would offer this, Mark.
Good. Thank you.
In the flipping the classroom stuff, where it's like what I was going to do in the classroom is now going to be the homework, because it's
Not enough.
well,
Okay,
no,
go
but
ahead.
I'm not done. The point is, the only reason that works, like the great teaching series kinds of things, is because the person in question has been teaching the subject for 25 years, right? And they've got the subject matter down to perfection, and they can do it, all right? The person who is just freshly minted in the profession will not have the ability, to deliver, right, that level of expertise as, prepackaged video or whatever. Now, I would say, yeah, you know what? The problem is that the classroom experience, the interactive part, is dissatisfying, because if it's all prepackaged too, right, it's not really interaction, right? It's something else. That would lead us to what we're doing in CE Collab, which is, I need a GPT of the teacher. I need an interactive version of the person that can, at not the mastery level, but at the initiation level of just learning the subject. I've heard those questions before over and over again. I'm available to answer them. Once I get to a kid who's a genius, all right, who basically exhausts the thing, has burned through it, then you really need to, put that kid in with a human being, all right, and start to have, a Socratic relationship with them, because you're going to exceed, that kind of student will exceed the capabilities of the teacher, all right, will actually say, I've never thought of that. That's a great question, Mark, all right, and, be able to advance, all right, on their own, together, or as a class, small cohort, the subject. I think I've told you before, but I'll just remind you that one of the most miraculous experiences I had growing up was going into seventh grade. It wasn't seventh grade, sorry, ninth grade, into high school, because it was a 4-year high school. And my earth science teacher deciding over the summer that the earth didn't work the way that the textbook talked about, right? That geosynclines were no longer the way that, the earth moved, all right, it was plate tectonics. And he threw the textbook out. He talked to, the principal and just said, I'm going to teach this out of magazine articles, Scientific American, and, blah, blah, blah. And we were learning at the same time that Ed Ruzek, who was the name of the teacher, we were learning with him, not from him. We were learning how the earth worked at the same time that he was relearning and rewiring his head about the dynamics of, the theory that he thought was appropriate. And it was magical.
Lucky you. Absolutely lucky you. And that the statistic of the tutor, or even the small group, being 2 standard deviations better than the classroom is long known. The interesting thing, I absolutely agree with you, that if you can ask your question when you want it, you can do that. The real problem with direct instruction is that it works really well if you want to learn something. If I go to you and say, Kevin, teach me about marketing, then you can teach me about marketing. But if I have to sign up for a marketing class, especially if I'm compelled to do that, I'm not interested in your direct instruction. It won't work. It won't go in. But and the reason I'm so project oriented is that if I'm trying to accomplish something, and I come up to a sticking point where you have the answer, and the answer is well known, and if I can just ask for that answer, then it's fabulous. So I'd much rather ask the GPT in my pocket for the answer, or which is the equivalent of going to YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's so anyway, that's where
it's kind of like, yeah, I can get, Mark, I have the answer for you.
Yeah.
And the dynamic pricing for that answer is $1 billion.
Right now.
I buy it.
It could be
So
more in a minute or two. So
that and Future Camp are just going to bankrupt me. But what the hell,
There you go. So with that, we're at the top of the hour.
Thank you all.
I would just say that on the, I'll close up my thoughts about dynamic pricing on this thing. Is the biggest price to be paid is allocation of your attention, not the money in your wallet. So, the dynamicism of, can I get what I want in the moment that I want it, which is kind of, recursive to what we were just discussing, that's nirvana right there, right? That's the young lady's illustrated primer, right? In the hands of what do I need to know right now? And as the person who couldn't spell when he was growing up, that then became, part of the PC revolution, where it was saying, this is misspelled. Here's the right spelling. All right. I'm an excellent speller right now. All right. Because it was giving me the answer in the moment. Right. And you didn't have to do it very many times to say, okay, now I know how that's spelled. Right. So, right. The dynamic interaction of the system, when I didn't know it was misspelled, right, there was no change. Right. It was just kind of like, damn it, Clark, can't you learn how to spell? Right.
And the interesting thing about that is that you paid attention. So not everybody does. So some people will just say, I don't give a shit how anything's spelled. I'll just put this through the spell checker at the end, and it will make all the corrections, and I'll just go on spelling the way I want to spell. So those are different.
Well, guess what? That's a quality of, you have to care, right? About,
you have to care about whatever it is you're doing to make it go in.
Well, you have to want to learn. And if you aren't interested in learning, then
no, you have to learn that. Not you have to learn. We all want to learn. It's that you have to be interested in wanting to learn that.
There are plenty of people that I have, in my life, right, who show, resistance to wanting to learn anything or change their mind. But that's a whole different.
That's a whole different conversation. I'd love to have.
Mike, any closing thoughts before we conclude today?
No, this is, I think, a fun and kind of productive discussion about a pretty, I think, arcane topic, at least till it got covered in these news stories. Mm-hmm. But I think, to your point, use your attention judiciously, and as you always say, be intentional. And I think now we need to be intentional about fast food and things we thought, were not going to be subject to these sorts of things. I don't mean that to sound like a negative Nelly. I think it's something we all need to get. We've kind of been living with it with airline pricing and other things. But on the other hand, we now have a lot of tools in our possession that will help us. As I said earlier, we'll be able to leverage this to our benefit. Hopefully,
That's right. It'll help us navigate the opportunity costs of the choices that are in front of us. So thanks for participating today. Greatly appreciate it. And as you said, Mike, everything you do, be intentional. We'll talk next week. Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you.